What if everything we think we know about human history is just the surface of a far deeper mystery? Hidden in the dust of ancient Mesopotamia, buried beneath layers of time and translation, lies a collection of texts so controversial, so unsettling, that they've been whispered about in hushed tones for centuries. These are the Forbidden Sumerian writings, clay tablets etched with cuneiform script that seem to describe something beyond myth, beyond legend, something called a human reset protocol. Picture this, a civilization from 6,000 years ago, the cradle of human culture, leaving behind instructions not just for building cities or worshipping gods, but for restarting humanity itself. Why would they write such a thing, and what does it mean for us today? The Sumerians were the world's first great storytellers, inventors of writing, architects of the earliest cities. But some of their most startling texts never made it into history books. These forbidden accounts speak of gods who didn't just create humans, they engineered us, guided us, and according to some interpretations, even reset us. The idea of a human reset protocol isn't just science fiction. It's woven into these ancient tablets in ways that defy easy explanation. Were the Sumerians recording divine commandments, or were they preserving warnings from a forgotten past, cycles of destruction and rebirth that echo through time? The answers may lie in fragments of text that scholars still argue over, lines that suggest humanity has been here before, not just once but many times. This isn't just about decoding old words, it's about confronting a possibility so vast it changes how we see ourselves. If these texts are real, if they're more than metaphor, then our understanding of history, of purpose, even of free will, might need rewriting. Over the next few minutes, we're going to unearth these forbidden stories piece by piece, tracing the clues left behind by a civilization that seemed to know secrets we're only beginning to grasp. You'll hear the translations that have sparked debates, the theories that blur the line between archaeology and prophecy, and the chilling question at the heart of it all: are we part of someone else's experiment? Strap in, because what comes next isn't just history, it's a mirror held up to humanity itself. The Sumerians didn't just build the first cities, they built the blueprint for civilization itself. Emerging around 5,500 years ago in what's now southern Iraq, this culture didn't just leave behind ruins, they left behind the very foundations of modern life: the wheel, the first written language, even advanced mathematics. But their most astonishing legacy isn't found in inventions or infrastructure, it's hidden in their words. These were people who mapped the stars with shocking accuracy, who wrote down myths so elaborate they rival modern epics, and who seem to possess knowledge that defies simple explanation. How did a society that ancient grasped concepts like planetary motion or genetic inheritance centuries before the rest of the world? Their writing system, cuneiform, wasn't just used for trade receipts or tax records. It preserved stories of gods who descended from the sky, of great floods that wiped the earth clean, of celestial beings who sculpted humanity from clay. These weren't just tales to entertain, they were sacred accounts, treated with reverence, passed down by scribes who believed they held vital truths. Take the famous Sumerian King List, for example. It doesn't just name rulers, it describes reigns lasting tens of thousands of years, rulers who descended from heaven, and a catastrophic event called the Great Deluge that reset everything. Modern scholars often dismiss this as myth, but what if the Sumerians were recording something far more unsettling? Their astronomical knowledge deepens the mystery. Clay tablets detail planetary movements with precision that shouldn't have been possible without telescopes. They tracked Venus's cycles, knew Saturn had rings, and described celestial events that align with modern calculations. Where did this insight come from? Some tablets even reference a great star that periodically returns, a detail that eerily parallels modern theories about rogue planets or comet cycles. Combine this with their obsession with water management, their advanced medical texts referencing life essence, and their sudden, unexplained decline, and a pattern emerges. This wasn't just a civilization ahead of its time. They acted like a people who'd inherited fragments of something much older, much stranger, and then there's the mythology. While other ancient cultures spoke of gods living on mountaintops or in the underworld, Sumerian deities operated like a council, deliberate, hierarchical, almost bureaucratic. Texts describe the Anunnaki not as abstract spirits but as beings who set tasks, who divided the lands, who established laws and even a chain of command. One tablet recounts a debate among these gods about whether to destroy mankind due to overpopulation, a scene that mirrors modern ethical dilemmas. Another describes a god fashioning the first humans as laborers, mixing divine essence with earthly material. These aren't just primitive creation myths, they read like technical manuals, complete with setbacks, trial runs, and a clear division between creators and creations. What makes these texts forbidden isn't just their controversial content, it's how deliberately they were obscured. Later empires like Babylon and Assyria copied Sumerian works but sanitized them, turning complex narratives into simplified hymns. When archaeologists first unearthed these tablets in the 19th century, many were labeled too sensitive for public release, locked away or dismissed as heretical nonsense. Even today, mainstream academia often treats them as literary curiosities rather than historical records. But when you piece together the astronomical data, the engineering feats, and the uncanny myths, a disturbing question lingers. Did the Sumerians know something we've forgotten? Were they not just inventors of writing but keepers of a warning? The story of how these forbidden Sumerian texts came to light reads like an archaeological thriller, a tale of dusty dig sites, political intrigue, and ideas so radical they threaten to rewrite history. It all began in the mid-19th century when explorers first started unearthing the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia. Among them was a self-taught linguist named Henry Rawlinson, who risked his life scaling the cliffs of Behistun to copy a massive trilingual inscription, the key that eventually unlocked cuneiform script. But as more tablets were excavated from the sands of Nineveh, Nippur, and scholars realized some contained narratives that didn't fit neatly into the accepted biblical or classical frameworks. One of the most explosive discoveries came from the library of Assyrian King Ashurbanipal, a trove of over 30,000 tablets buried beneath the ruins of his palace. Among them were copies of much older Sumerian originals texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which contained a flood story eerily similar to Noah's Ark, but written centuries earlier. When translator George Smith deciphered these lines in 1872, the British Museum erupted in excitement, but soon other tablets emerged with even more controversial content. Detailed accounts of gods performing genetic experiments, discussions of resetting civilizations, and calendars tracking celestial cycles far beyond what the ancients should have known. The term forbidden wasn't just dramatic flair, these texts faced active suppression. Victorian scholars steeped in religious traditions often dismissed them as pagan exaggerations or labeled them too heretical for public discussion. Even in the 20th century, when researchers like Samuel Noah Kramer began systematically translating Sumerian literature, certain tablets were quietly set aside, some for their sexual content, others for their radical challenge to human origins. Zecharia Sitchin's interpretations in the 1970s brought wider attention but also academic backlash, with mainstream scholars dismissing his ancient astronaut theories as fringe fantasy. Yet the physical evidence remained undeniable. Tablets like the one labeled K8538 in the British Museum's collection describe advanced medical procedures involving life water, while others reference a tablet of destinies that could alter human fate. Archaeologists like Leonard Woolley, who excavated in the 1920s, found artifacts that matched these descriptions: strange figurines with elongated heads, intricate star maps, and even what some believed to be ancient batteries. The more these discoveries piled up, the clearer it became. Someone, thousands of years ago, possessed knowledge that still unnerves us today. Why does this matter now? Because every generation interprets these texts through its own lens. Where Victorian scholars saw blasphemy and mid-century academics saw myth, modern researchers equipped with genetic science and AI translation tools are uncovering layers of meaning nobody anticipated. The real forbidden knowledge wasn't just in the tablets themselves, it was in the realization that history might not be a straight line, but a spiral, with the Sumerians standing at a point much closer to the beginning than we ever imagined. At the heart of these forbidden texts lies a concept so jarring it forces us to reconsider humanity's place in the cosmos: the so-called human reset protocol. To the Sumerians, this wasn't some abstract myth. It was woven into their understanding of time itself. Their tablets describe existence as a series of cycles, each ending in catastrophe, floods, fires, celestial upheavals followed by a rebirth orchestrated by their gods. Think of it like a cosmic software update where humanity isn't just wiped out but deliberately reconfigured, its flaws corrected, its trajectory altered. The term protocol here is chillingly precise. These weren't random disasters. They were systematic, almost calculated interventions. One of the clearest examples comes from the Eridu Genesis, a Sumerian text predating the Bible by over 1,000 years. It recounts how the gods, displeased with humanity's noise and disobedience, convened a divine council. The decision: a great flood to cleanse the land. But here's where it gets eerie. Unlike later flood myths, this wasn't framed as punishment alone. The tablet describes precise instructions: specific animals saved, seeds preserved, even a chosen survivor, Ziusudra, the Sumerian Noah, given exact blueprints for survival. This wasn't destruction for its own sake. It was a controlled reset, a reboot with safeguards in place to ensure continuity. Then there's the Atrahasis epic, where the reset idea takes on even darker tones. Humanity, originally created as laborers for the gods, multiplies too quickly, becoming too loud. The gods respond not once but 3 times, first with plague, then famine, finally the flood. Each time, humanity rebounds, adapting, persisting, until the gods resort to total annihilation. But crucially, they don't start from scratch, they tweak. They refine. They introduce sterility, infant mortality, and shorter lifespans, biological limiters to keep population in check. This isn't just mythology. It reads like an engineered solution, a deliberate adjustment to a flawed design. The Sumerians recorded these cycles with meticulous detail. The Sumerian King List divides history into distinct eras, each ending with the phrase, "Then the flood swept over." Before the deluge, kings ruled for tens of thousands of years. After, lifespans shrink dramatically. Modern scholars often dismiss these time frames as symbolic, but what if they're reporting something literal? The Lament for another key text, describes a reset so catastrophic that the gods themselves wept. Yet it also hints at a purpose, a chance to build the city anew, purer than before. Destruction, then, wasn't an end. It was a necessary step in some larger plan, and that's what makes the reset protocol theory so unsettling. If these texts are more than allegory, they suggest humanity isn't just subject to random chaos. We're part of an experiment with built-in fail-safes, where the experimenters, these Anunnaki gods, intervene when their creation strays too far from the intended path. It raises questions that echo into our modern age. Are natural disasters, pandemics, even climate change just part of the cycle? Or worse, could they be features, not bugs, in some unimaginable design? The Sumerians seem to have believed their gods left them warnings embedded in clay, waiting for a future civilization to decipher. If they were right, we might be reading the manual without realizing we're part of the procedure. The Anunnaki weren't just gods to the Sumerians, they were hands-on architects, depicted in the texts as a pantheon of beings who didn't merely observe humanity but actively shaped it. Unlike the distant deities of later religions, these figures rolled up their sleeves, engaging in what the tablets describe as direct genetic manipulation, social engineering, and even conflict among themselves over how to manage their creation. The name Anunnaki itself translates to "those who from heaven to earth came," a phrase that sparked endless debate. Were they metaphors for natural forces? Or, as some researchers suggest, could they represent an advanced civilization that interacted with early humans in ways we're only beginning to comprehend? Take the Enuma Elish, one of the oldest surviving creation epics. It describes the Anunnaki not as omnipotent spirits, but as workers beings who toiled to mold the earth, who dug rivers and piled mountains, and who eventually grew tired of their labor. This exhaustion led to their most infamous decision, fashioning humans as a replacement workforce. The Atrahasis epic fills in the gruesome details, recounting how the god Enki mixed clay with the blood of a slain Anunnaki named Jeshtu-E, creating a hybrid creature capable of bearing the god's workload. It's a scene that blurs the line between myth and laboratory notes, suggesting a process far more technical than divine inspiration. But the Anunnaki's involvement didn't stop at creation. Tablets like the Nippur Lament depict them as micromanagers, dividing humanity into roles: kings, priests, laborers, and enforcing strict hierarchies. They taught agriculture, mathematics, and astronomy, yet also imposed laws with brutal consequences. When humans rebelled or overpopulated, the response was swift: plagues, droughts, and finally, the flood. This pattern of intervention fuels the reset protocol theory. The Anunnaki didn't just punish, they recalibrated, tweaking human biology and society like programmers debugging flawed code. The Sumerian King List even hints at this, showing lifespans dropping sharply after each catastrophe, as if humanity's settings had been adjusted. Modern interpretations of these accounts range from the symbolic to the sensational. Mainstream archaeology often dismisses the Anunnaki as mythic archetypes, symbols of natural forces or social power structures. But alternative researchers point to eerie consistencies in the text's descriptions of advanced technology, genetic knowledge, and celestial events that align with modern scientific understanding. The Anunnaki's fire weapons and flying chariots sound uncomfortably like ancient attempts to explain advanced machinery. Their obsession with gold, mentioned in multiple tablets as a substance needed to repair the atmosphere, mirrors contemporary theories about gold's use in aerospace technology. Perhaps most chilling is the Anunnaki's own internal conflict. Tablets like the War of the Gods reveal factions among them, some advocating for humanity's preservation, others pushing for its eradication. Enki, often portrayed as humanity's ally, is said to have secretly warned Ziusudra of the coming flood, defying the Council's orders. This tension suggests the reset protocol wasn't unanimous, it was contested, with some Anunnaki viewing humans as mistakes to be erased and others as experiments worth preserving. So what does this mean for us today? If the Anunnaki were real, whether as extraterrestrials, a lost civilization, or metaphors for forces beyond our understanding, their legacy lingers in our deepest questions. Are we autonomous, or are we still part of someone else's design? The Sumerians seemed to believe their gods would return, that the cycles would repeat. As we face modern crises, climate upheaval, pandemics, genetic engineering, their warnings echo with unsettling relevance. Maybe the forbidden texts weren't meant to scare us. Maybe they were meant to prepare us. After all, the most terrifying part of a reset isn't the destruction. It's realizing you might not be the one holding the controls. The Epic of Gilgamesh isn't just the world's oldest surviving work of literature, it's a time capsule of forgotten truths. A story so layered with cryptic details that it reads less like myth and more like encrypted history. At its core, the epic follows Gilgamesh, a king torn between his divine heritage and mortal limitations, but woven into his journey are clues that echo the reset protocol idea with startling clarity. Take the famous flood narrative often compared to Noah's Ark. While later versions sanitize the tale, the original Sumerian account, embedded within Gilgamesh's 11th tablet, reveals unsettling specifics. The flood isn't just divine wrath, it's a calculated purge. The god Enki doesn't simply warn Utnapishtim to build an ark. He provides exact dimensions, precise materials, even a timetable tied to celestial events. This isn't folklore, it's an instruction manual for survival, as if someone knew exactly how to reboot civilization. But the flood is just one piece of the puzzle. Earlier in the epic, Gilgamesh's quest for immortality leads him to a garden of the gods where he encounters a being called Sijuri. She doesn't offer him eternal life. Instead, she delivers a chilling revelation. The gods allotted death to mankind, keeping life for themselves. This isn't poetic fatalism. It mirrors other Sumerian texts describing humanity as a deliberately limited creation, designed with built-in expiration dates. Later, when Gilgamesh finally meets Utnapishtim, the flood survivor, their dialogue takes an even darker turn. Utnapishtim speaks of a time before the flood when humanity was noisy and the gods could not sleep. The solution, not just destruction but a redesign. After the waters recede, the gods gift Utnapishtim immortality, not as a reward but as an exception, a safeguard to preserve knowledge across cycles. Then there's the epic's most haunting passage, the description of the underworld. When Enkidu, Gilgamesh's companion, dies, his ghost returns with a report so vivid it feels like an eyewitness account. He describes a realm where the dead are sorted by their fate, those who died in battle, those who left many children, those with no one to mourn them. But one group stands out, those whose bodies the gods took away. These aren't souls judged by moral deeds, they're catalogued by the manner of their passing, as if part of some cosmic inventory. Combined with the epic's recurring theme of divine councils debating humanity's fate, the implication is hard to ignore. The gods didn't just watch, they curated. Modern translations have softened these edges, framing Gilgamesh as a hero's journey about accepting mortality. But the original tablets suggest something far more provocative. The epic's structure itself mirrors a reset. Each of its 12 tablets corresponds to an astrological age, with Gilgamesh's failures and revelations aligning with celestial transitions. Even the famous plant of immortality, which Gilgamesh retrieves only to have stolen by a serpent, fits the pattern. In Sumerian symbology, serpents represent cycles, shedding skin to renew. The message isn't just that immortality is elusive, it's that humanity's destiny is locked into a loop, with each iteration losing fragments of the past. What makes the Epic of Gilgamesh so pivotal isn't just its age, it's the way it weaves personal struggle with cosmic intervention, framing human existence as something observed, measured, and occasionally adjusted. When Gilgamesh returns to Uruk at the epic's close, he doesn't just accept death, he engraves his story on the city's walls, an act that feels less like resignation and more like a warning. Perhaps that's the true purpose of these forbidden texts, not to record history but to prepare us for the next reset. The Sumerian King List isn't just a record of rulers, it's a cryptic ledger of time itself, a document so bizarre that scholars still debate whether it's history, myth, or something in between. Written on clay tablets over 4,000 years ago, it names kings who ruled for spans that defy belief, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years. Then, abruptly, the timeline shifts. Lifespans drop to mere decades, as if some cosmic switch had been flipped. To modern eyes, this looks like fantasy. But what if the Sumerians were encoding a terrifying truth, that their world had survived multiple resets, each one compressing human existence into shorter, more controlled cycles? Take the list's most jarring feature, the antediluvian kings, the ones who ruled before the Great Flood. The first entry, Ululim, is said to have reigned for 28,800 years. His successor ruled 36,000. 8 kings later, the total adds up to 241,200 years of continuous rule, all before the flood swept everything away. After the waters receded, the longest reign drops to 1,200 years, then keeps shrinking. Mainstream archaeology dismisses these numbers as symbolic, representing dynasties rather than individuals. But the Sumerians were meticulous record keepers, precise in their astronomy, mathematics, and trade logs. Why would they exaggerate here? The key might lie in the list's recurring refrain, "Then the flood swept over." This phrase doesn't just mark a disaster. It punctuates distinct epochs, separating eras of near-immortal rulers from those of mortal ones. Some tablets even specify that post-flood kings descended from heaven, implying a change in leadership, not just longevity. The pattern is too deliberate to ignore. Superhuman reigns, a cataclysm, then a new order with compressed lifespans. It mirrors other Sumerian texts describing the Anunnakis tinkering with human biology, reducing our lifespan to curb overpopulation. Theories about the king list range from the pragmatic to the extraordinary. Some suggest the long reigns represent ancient attempts to record precessional cycles, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that takes 25,920 years to complete. Others propose these numbers encode advanced astronomical knowledge, with each year representing something else entirely, like orbital periods. But the most provocative interpretation ties directly to the reset protocol idea, that these weren't human kings at all, but Anunnaki overlords overseeing humanity's early development, their reigns ending when their experiment required recalibration. Support for this comes from the list's inconsistencies. Unlike later king lists that glorify unbroken dynasties, the Sumerian version acknowledges abrupt transitions, cities abandoned, power shifted, knowledge lost. The city of Kish, for example, gains prominence only after the flood, as if the old order had been deliberately dismantled. Even the language changes, with post-flood rulers bearing Semitic names instead of Sumerian ones. This isn't just political turnover, it's the cultural equivalent of a system reboot with new parameters in place. Then there's the list's eerie parallel to modern genetics. Studies in mitochondrial DNA suggest human populations underwent severe bottlenecks events where our numbers dwindled to near extinction around the same time the Sumerians placed their flood. The king list's numerical decline mirrors genetic decay rates seen in isolated species. Coincidence or evidence that the Sumerians preserved a memory of real, physical resets events that pruned humanity's branches to reshape its growth? Perhaps the most haunting detail is the list's unfinished nature. Later copies made by Babylonian scribes omit the antediluvian section entirely, as if someone decided certain truths were too dangerous to preserve. But the original tablets remain, whispering across millennia. They don't just record kings, they document a rhythm, one of creation, destruction, and recreation that the Sumerians seemed to believe would repeat indefinitely. In their eyes, history wasn't linear. It was a spiral winding back on itself, with each turn bringing us closer to the next reset. Whether metaphor or warning, the king list forces us to ask, if they were right, where are we in the cycle now? Zecharia Sitchin's name is either revered or ridiculed depending on who you ask, a self-taught linguist whose interpretations of Sumerian texts catapulted ancient astronaut theories into the mainstream. In the 1970s, Sitchin made a bold claim. The Anunnaki weren't just mythical gods but flesh and blood beings from a distant planet called Nibiru, who genetically engineered humans as a slave race. His books, starting with the 12th planet, sold millions, but they also ignited a firestorm of controversy that still rages today. At the heart of Sitchin's argument was his translation of cuneiform terms. He insisted that words like Shem didn't just mean name but referred to rockets, that Apkallu weren't wise sages but astronauts in fish-like suits, and that the Sumerian creation myth detailed a literal splicing of Anunnaki DNA with primitive hominids. His most explosive assertion, that gold mentioned repeatedly in Sumerian texts was mined by early humans under Anunnaki supervision to repair their planet's failing atmosphere. To Sitchin, these weren't metaphors, they were eyewitness accounts of extraterrestrial intervention preserved in clay for millennia. Scholars weren't just skeptical, they were outright hostile. Mainstream Assyriologists like Michael Heiser dismantled Sitchin's translations point by point, arguing he misread basic grammar and ignored context. The term Nibiru, for example, appears in Babylonian astronomy as a crossing point or celestial marker, not a rogue planet. Critics also noted that Sitchin's theories relied on cherry-picked phrases while overlooking entire passages that contradicted his narrative. Even his planetary science raised eyebrows. No known celestial body matches Nibiru's proposed 3,600-year orbit, and NASA has repeatedly debunked claims of its existence. Yet for all the academic backlash, Sitchin's ideas refuse to die. Part of their staying power lies in the questions they force us to confront. If the Anunnaki weren't aliens, why did the Sumerians depict them with such technological precision? Why do their myths describe genetic mixing, celestial maps, and resets in terms that feel uncomfortably modern? Sitchin's fans argue that mainstream archaeology's rigid framework can't explain these anomalies, so they dismiss them as fantasy. But the divide isn't just about evidence, it's about how we define history itself. The truth likely lies somewhere in the muddle between extremes. Sitchin was undeniably creative, but creativity isn't accuracy. His work opened doors for alternative researchers while also muddying the waters with unverified claims. What endures isn't his specifics, but the broader dilemma he highlighted. Ancient texts often contain layers of meaning that defy simple categorization. Whether you see him as a visionary or a fabulist, one thing is certain. The Sumerian tablets continue to resist easy answers, leaving just enough ambiguity to keep us wondering. The connection between Sumerian texts and ancient astronaut theory isn't just fringe speculation. It's rooted in details so precise they defy easy dismissal. When you read these tablets with fresh eyes, stripping away assumptions about what ancient people could have known, patterns emerge that feel less like mythology and more like documented contact. The Sumerians didn't just describe their gods as powerful beings. They recorded specifics: how they looked, what they carried, even the vehicles they arrived in. Take the term Dingir, the cuneiform symbol preceding the names of deities. Mainstream translations call it a divine determinative, but ancient astronaut theorists point out something startling. The symbol resembles a rocket, complete with fins and a pointed nose cone. Coincidence maybe, but when you pair it with texts describing gods riding in fiery chariots or ascending to heaven in whirlwinds, the imagery starts to feel uncomfortably literal. Then there's the matter of technology. The Sumerian epic Enigmatic and the Lord of Aratta describes a mysterious object called the Tablet of Destinies, a device that could bind the decrees of the gods and alter reality itself. Ancient astronaut proponents argue this wasn't poetic metaphor, it mirrors modern concepts like quantum entanglement or holographic projection. Even more striking are medical texts detailing surgeries performed with shining instruments, or accounts of the goddess Inanna receiving a glowing, crystalline object containing the blueprints of civilization. These aren't vague myths, they're technical manuals hiding in plain sight, describing advanced tools with a clarity that feels deliberate. The biological details push the boundaries further. The Atrahasis epic doesn't just say humans were made from clay. It specifies a meticulous process where the goddess Ninti, Lady of the Rib, mixed divine blood with earthly matter. In modern terms, that sounds eerily like genetic engineering, splicing alien DNA with indigenous hominids. Sumerian art reinforces this, depicting the Anunnaki with elongated skulls, oversized eyes, and sometimes even what appear to be wrist devices. Mainstream scholars dismiss these as stylistic choices, but why would a culture with no contact with other civilizations invent such consistent biomechanical imagery? Critics argue that ancient astronaut theory cherry-picks evidence, ignoring cultural context. They're right to a point. Yes, the Sumerians used poetic language. Yes, their worldview blended science and spirituality. But that doesn't explain the precision of their astronomical knowledge, like describing Pluto's existence millennia before telescopes or calculating the precession of equinoxes with uncanny accuracy. Nor does it account for their obsession with the Pleiades, a star cluster they called the Seven Judges and tied directly to the Anunnaki's origins. These aren't random guesses, they're data points carefully recorded by a culture that believed their gods came from the stars and might return. The real power of this connection isn't proving aliens visited Earth. It's realizing how much we've underestimated ancient people. Whether the Sumerians interacted with extraterrestrials or simply preserved fragments of a lost advanced culture, their writings force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Humanity's origins might be far stranger, far more complex than we've been taught. And if their tablets are indeed a warning or a message, we're only beginning to decode it. The Sumerian flood story doesn't just echo the biblical tale of Noah, it predates it by over 1,000 years, and the differences between them reveal something far more unsettling than a simple moral parable. In the Eridu Genesis, one of the oldest surviving fragments of Sumerian literature, the gods don't send the flood out of anger or a desire to punish wickedness. They do it because humanity's noise has become unbearable, a logistical problem disrupting their rest. The text reads like a committee meeting gone wrong. The land was noisy, the gods could not sleep. The solution, not salvation for the righteous, but a systematic wipe. Enki, the god of wisdom, doesn't even object to the decision. He just quietly warns the righteous man, Ziusudra, to build an ark according to exact specifications. This isn't divine justice, it's pest control. Compare this to the Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh, where the flood survivor Utnapishtim receives his warning through a reed wall, a whisper from the gods who can't openly defy their peers. Or the biblical version where Noah is chosen for his virtue, a moral standout in a corrupt world. The Sumerian account lacks that moral framework entirely. The flood isn't about good versus evil, it's about efficiency. Ziusudra isn't spared because he's righteous, he's spared because Enki needs a backup file, a way to restore the system after the purge. And then there's the aftermath. In Genesis, Noah's family repopulates the earth under a rainbow covenant, a promise that such destruction won't happen again. But in the Eridu Genesis, the gods immediately regret the flood, not out of compassion but because they've lost their workforce. Who will bake our bread? Who will pour our beer? They lament. Their solution: introduce mortality, famine, and infertility to keep future populations in check. This isn't a story of redemption. It's a troubleshooting log, a record of adjustments made to a flawed creation. The parallels extend far beyond Mesopotamia. The Hindu Matsya Purana tells of Manu, warned by a fish avatar of Vishnu to build a boat before the deluge. Greek mythology describes Deucalion and Pirha repopulating the earth by throwing stones that become people. Indigenous Australian lore speaks of a great flood unleashed by ancestral spirits to cleanse the land. Even the Popol Vuh of the Maya mentions a watery destruction that wiped out an early, imperfect version of humanity. The consistency is staggering, not in the details, but in the underlying theme, a catastrophic reset, often tied to divine displeasure, followed by a fragile rebirth. But here's what sets the Sumerian version apart: its chilling lack of sentimentality. Other flood myths wrap the disaster in layers of moral lesson or cosmic balance. The Sumerians present it as a cold, administrative decision. The Atrahasis epic even spells it out: the gods send 3 progressively harsher resets: plague, famine, then flood, because humanity keeps bouncing back, exceeding its programmed limits. This isn't mythology, it's protocol. So was the Great Flood just a story, or did the Sumerians preserve a memory of something real, a cataclysm so traumatic it echoed across continents? Geological evidence suggests the Black Sea flooded catastrophically around 5600 BC, drowning settlements under 400 feet of water. Ancient climate data reveals sudden spikes in global sea levels at the end of the last ice age. Could these events have inspired the myths? Maybe, but the Sumerians didn't just record a disaster. They recorded a pattern, a cycle of destruction and recalibration that their texts insist will repeat. That's the real horror of the flood myths, not the water. Not the death, but the implication that humanity's survival was never guaranteed. It was permitted, a temporary exception in an ongoing experiment. When Ziusudra steps off his ark, he isn't given a rainbow. He's given immortality and sent to the edge of the world, a living backup drive waiting for the next system crash. The flood wasn't the end. It was just the first reset we know about. Among the most enigmatic artifacts described in Sumerian texts, none spark more intrigue than the so-called tablets of destiny, objects said to hold the very blueprint of existence. These weren't just sacred relics, they were depicted as functional instruments, wielded by the gods to dictate the fates of both mortals and deities alike. In the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic adapted from earlier Sumerian sources, the tablet's power is absolute. When the storm god Marduk defeats the chaotic Tiamat, he doesn't just claim kingship, he seizes the tablets of destiny, gaining control over the cosmic order itself. The message is clear: whoever holds these tablets doesn't just rule, they reprogram reality. But what were they, really? Descriptions scattered across multiple texts paint a contradictory picture. Some call them physical objects shining like the sun, inscribed with cuneiform symbols that pulsed with energy. Others suggest they were metaphysical, a conceptual interface between the divine and mortal realms. The Era epic describes them as a set of laws so fundamental that altering them could unravel time. When the god Era temporarily steals the tablets, chaos erupts, seasons stutter, rivers flow backward, and humans lose all sense of purpose until order is restored. This isn't just mythological flair, it mirrors modern theories about quantum fields or the simulation hypothesis, where reality operates according to mutable code. The connection to human resets becomes chillingly explicit in lesser-known texts. A fragment from the library of Ashurbanipal recounts how the Anunnaki used the tablets to set the lifespan of kings and mark the days of destruction. Another, catalogued as K3464 in the British Museum, mentions a great adjustment where the gods rewrote the tablets after the flood, shortening human lives and implanting forgetfulness to erase memories of the antediluvian world. If true, these weren't just records of fate, they were tools to engineer it. With humanity's cyclical collapses baked into the design, scholars remain divided. Traditionalists argue the tablets symbolize nothing more than royal authority, likening them to Mesopotamian versions of a king's scepter. But alternative researchers highlight eerie parallels with modern technology. The Sumerian term for the tablets, dup shumati, translates literally as tablets of names, a phrase that takes on new meaning when you consider how today's AI systems use naming conventions to categorize and control data. The gods' ability to bind destinies by inscribing names echoes blockchain technology, where immutable ledgers dictate outcomes. Even the tablet's alleged luminosity matches descriptions of plasma-based interfaces or holographic displays. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in their alleged location. Multiple texts place the tablets in a hidden chamber beneath Enlil's temple in Nippur, guarded by mechanical watchers that sound less like mythical creatures and more like automated security systems. Babylonian hymns even warn that unauthorized access triggers a light that burns without fire, a phrase that could describe anything from laser defenses to radiation. This isn't just treasure guarding, it's access control for a system believed to regulate existence itself. What does this mean for the reset theory? If the tablets functioned as a divine operating manual, then every cataclysm, the floods, the plagues, the abrupt collapses of civilizations wasn't random disaster. It was planned obsolescence, a scheduled reboot to correct humanity's drift from its intended path. The Sumerians may have left us more than warnings. They might have handed us the terms and conditions written in clay, waiting millennia for us to read the fine print. Among the most mysterious and hotly debated Sumerian texts is the so-called Lost Book of Enki, a controversial collection of writings that purports to be the first-person account of the Anunnaki god who allegedly engineered humanity. Unlike traditional cuneiform tablets unearthed by archaeologists, this text surfaced in the modern era through the translations of Zecharia Sitchin, who claimed it was pieced together from fragmented sources. Its contents, if authentic, would be nothing short of revolutionary, a step-by-step chronicle of how the Anunnaki designed, manipulated, and periodically reset human civilization. But is it a legitimate artifact or an elaborate fabrication? The Lost Book of Enki reads like an insider's manual, detailing Enki's role in creating Homo sapiens as a hybrid species, part Anunnaki, part earthly hominid. It describes a process eerily reminiscent of modern genetic engineering, where divine blood, possibly DNA, was mixed with clay to fashion a workforce capable of mining gold, the resource the Anunnaki desperately needed to stabilize their planet's atmosphere. But the text goes further, outlining what sounds like a long-term management strategy. Enki allegedly confesses to embedding hidden knowledge within human myths, ensuring that even after resets, global floods, cosmic bombardments, or deliberate purges, fragments of truth would survive in stories passed down through generations. Critics dismiss the Lost Book of Enki as a creative hoax, pointing to glaring inconsistencies. For one, there's no record of its existence in any academic catalogue of Sumerian literature. The language and style deviate from authenticated cuneiform scripts, borrowing heavily from later Babylonian motifs. Even more damning, some phrases match modern linguistic interpretations that wouldn't have been possible for ancient scribes to conceptualize. Mainstream scholars argue it's a pastiche of real myths, rewritten through Sitchin's speculative lens. Yet intriguing parallels exist. The Lost Book echoes themes found in verified Sumerian texts like the Atrahasis epic, where Enki defies orders to destroy humanity. It also mirrors the Mesopotamian concept of me, divine decrees that govern civilization's functions, which the Lost Book describes as programmable knowledge implants. Even the idea of resets aligns with the Sumerian King List and flood narratives. The problem isn't necessarily the ideas themselves, but their packaging. Did Sitchin reconstruct a lost account, or did he project modern conspiracy theories onto ancient clay? The answer may lie in the text's most chilling passage, a prophecy of future resets. Enki allegedly warns that humanity's growth would eventually trigger another intervention, not by flood, but by fire and stones from heaven. This mirrors other cultures' doomsday predictions, from the Book of Revelation's fiery apocalypse to Hindu prophecies of Kalki's cleansing wrath. Whether fabricated or not, the Lost Book of Enki forces us to confront a pattern. Civilizations across time have believed their existence is cyclical, not linear. So does it matter if the text is fake? In one sense, no, because the questions it raises are real. The Sumerians did write about genetic tampering, celestial cycles, and cataclysmic reboots. Whether this particular book is genuine or not, it acts as a cipher for decoding themes that official history struggles to explain. Perhaps its greatest value isn't as a historical document, but as a mirror reflecting humanity's oldest, deepest fear: that we are not the architects of our destiny, but subjects in someone else's experiment. And if that's true, the Lost Book of Enki might be less of a discovery and more of a warning we were never meant to find. Among the most startling claims in Sumerian texts is the notion that humanity wasn't simply created, we were engineered. The Atrahasis epic doesn't just describe gods shaping humans from clay. It outlines a process that reads like an ancient laboratory protocol. The goddess Ninti, whose name literally means Lady of the Rib, doesn't just breathe life into her creations. She mixes divine blood specifically from a slain Anunnaki named Jeshtu-E with earthly material to produce a hybrid workforce. This isn't vague mythology. It's a detailed recipe, complete with ingredients and a clear purpose, to fashion beings strong enough to toil in gold mines but docile enough to obey. The parallels to modern genetic engineering are impossible to ignore. Swap clay for stem cells and divine blood for spliced DNA, and suddenly the Sumerians sound less like primitive storytellers and more like chroniclers of advanced biotechnology. But the Anunnaki's tinkering didn't stop at creation. Later tablets hint at ongoing adjustments like updates to flawed software. After the flood, texts describe the gods introducing noise into human biology, shortened lifespans, infertility, and disease to prevent overpopulation. The Sumerian King List reinforces this, showing antediluvian rulers living tens of thousands of years while post-flood kings barely exceed a millennium. This isn't just poetic exaggeration. It mirrors modern discoveries about telomeres and genetic aging, as if the Sumerians preserved a memory of deliberate biological downgrades. Even more chilling are references to destiny tablets that could rewrite human traits on a whim, a concept uncomfortably close to CRISPR gene editing technology. Fast forward to today, and the line between Sumerian myth and scientific reality blurs further. Transhumanism, the movement to augment human biology with technology, echoes the Anunnaki's alleged projects. Silicon Valley visionaries talk about merging AI with human neurons, just as Enki supposedly infused divine intelligence into clay. Billionaires fund lifespan extension research, mirroring the antediluvian quest for immortality. Even the gold obsession persists. Modern nanotechnology uses gold nanoparticles for medical applications, eerily aligning with Sumerian claims that gold was vital for the gods' survival. Yet the most haunting parallel isn't technical, it's ethical. The Sumerian texts frame humanity as a designed species bound by parameters set by higher intelligences. As we stand on the brink of editing our own genome, the question shifts from, could the Anunnaki have engineered us, to, are we becoming the Anunnaki? The tablets might be more than relics. They could be a cautionary tale, warning that every creator eventually faces the temptation to reset its creation. To the Sumerians, time wasn't a straight path marching toward progress. It was a wheel turning endlessly, with civilizations rising and falling in predictable rhythms. Their texts describe existence as a series of repeating cycles, each marked by golden ages of knowledge, followed by catastrophic collapses, and then rebirths from the ashes. This wasn't just poetic symbolism, it was a foundational belief etched into their calendars, their rituals, even their architecture. Take the ziggurats, those massive step temples reaching for the heavens. They weren't just altars for worship, they were time capsules, built to survive the floods and fires that their myths insisted would come again. The message was clear: destruction wasn't the end. It was part of the pattern. The proof lies in their sacred astronomy. While later cultures tracked time in linear dynasties, the Sumerians mapped celestial events with an obsession for recurrence. Their astronomers recorded the movements of Venus with such precision that modern scientists still marvel at their accuracy. But it wasn't just about predicting eclipses or solstices. Their star charts included references to a great return, a cyclical event tied to the god Nibiru's orbit, which they believed brought periods of upheaval and renewal. The Enuma Anu Enlil, a collection of celestial omens, warned that when certain constellations aligned, the gods would cleanse the land once more. This wasn't superstition. It was a countdown to the next reset. Their myths reinforced this view at every turn. The Epic of Gilgamesh doesn't just tell of one flood, it frames it as the latest in a series. Utnapishtim, the immortal flood survivor, speaks of earlier cataclysms forgotten by all but the gods. The Sumerian King List doesn't merely document rulers, it divides history into distinct eras, each shattered by a then the flood swept over moment. Even their creation story, the Enuma Elish, describes the universe as cyclical, with the god Marduk slaying the chaos dragon Tiamat not once, but perpetually, as if the battle between order and chaos must be refought in every epoch. This cyclical worldview bled into everyday life. Sumerian farmers practiced crop rotation millennia before modern agronomy, understanding that the land needed periodic renewal. Their legal codes included clean slate decrees, where debts were forgiven at set intervals, echoing the cosmic idea that society, like nature, required regular resets to function. The Akitu festival, their New Year celebration, wasn't just a party. It was a symbolic reenactment of the world's rebirth, complete with the ritual humiliation of the king, who had to prove his worthiness to rule anew each cycle. Most striking is how their cyclical time defies our modern linear assumptions. We see history as progress, from primitive to advanced, from ignorance to enlightenment. The Sumerians saw it as a spiral where technological peaks were inevitably followed by returns to simplicity. Their texts describe a time before the flood when kingship descended from heaven, bearing gifts of advanced medicine, astronomy, and engineering knowledge lost in the deluge and only partially recovered. This aligns eerily with archaeological evidence of the Younger Dryas period, where advanced toolmaking and agriculture appear suddenly, then vanish, as if someone hit a reset button on human development. So why does this matter today? Because the Sumerians weren't just predicting apocalypses, they were warning about momentum. Their cycles weren't random. They were triggered by human actions, overpopulation, environmental degradation, rebellion against the gods. Sound familiar as we face climate crises, pandemics, and the specter of nuclear war? Their insistence that history rhymes feels less like myth and more like a manual. The wheel keeps turning. The only question is whether we're smart enough to recognize our place in the cycle before it completes another revolution. At the core of Sumerian cosmic dread lies Nibiru, a celestial body so shrouded in controversy that it straddles the line between astronomy and myth. Unlike ordinary planets, Nibiru wasn't just a passive observer in the night sky. The Sumerians depicted it as a wandering force, a rogue traveler whose elongated orbit brought it perilously close to Earth every 3,600 years. When it arrived, tablets describe it as a great star with wings, a flaming harbinger that triggered earthquakes, reversed rivers, and according to some translations, even shifted Earth's axis. This wasn't just poetic imagery, it was a calendar of catastrophe, a celestial clock counting down to the next global reset. What makes Nibiru so pivotal isn't just its destructive potential. It's the chilling precision with which the Sumerians tied its cycles to human upheaval. The Enuma Elish recounts how the planet's gravitational pull once tore the cosmic goddess Tiamat apart, creating the asteroid belt and Earth itself from her remains. Later texts suggest Nibiru's periodic returns coincided with every major collapse in Sumerian history: the fall of Akkad, the Gutian invasions, even the abrupt abandonment of Ur. The pattern was too consistent to ignore. Each time this dark star approached, societies crumbled, technologies vanished, and humanity was forced to rebuild from scratch. Modern astronomers remain deeply divided. Mainstream science dismisses Nibiru as fantasy, pointing out no known celestial body matches its described orbit. Yet anomalies persist. Infrared surveys have detected unexplained gravitational perturbations in the outer solar system, clusters of icy objects with odd, clustered orbits that suggest the pull of an unseen mass. The hypothetical Planet 9, proposed by Caltech researchers in 2016, shares eerie similarities with Nibiru, a super-Earth with a highly elliptical path that could theoretically intersect our inner solar system every few millennia. Even NASA-owned data from the WISE telescope admits the possibility of massive, undiscovered objects lurking beyond Neptune. The Sumerians may have lacked telescopes, but their astronomical tablets reveal impossible knowledge. They mapped Pluto's existence thousands of years before its official discovery, described Neptune as a deep blue watery star, and calculated Nibiru's orbit with a precision that only modern computers could verify. Their understanding of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, allowed them to predict celestial alignments with terrifying accuracy. If Nibiru was pure myth, how did they detail its gravitational effects on other planets or its alleged composition of red iron dust? A detail that aligns oddly with modern theories about rogue planets rich in iron oxide. Beyond the astronomy lies a darker narrative. Sumerian hymns refer to Nibiru as the planet of the crossing, the Anunnaki's homeland. When it neared Earth, the gods allegedly descended to oversee their experiment, to assess, adjust, or in extreme cases erase. The Era Epic describes one such intervention where Nibiru's approach triggered 7 evil winds that purged Mesopotamia of its sins. This wasn't random destruction. It was quality control, a cosmic audit where failing civilizations were scrapped like flawed prototypes. Today, as conspiracy theorists inflate Nibiru into doomsday clickbait, we risk missing the Sumerians' real warning. It wasn't about a single apocalyptic planet. It was about cycles, recognizing that civilizations, like orbits, have rhythms. Whether Nibiru exists or not, their message echoes across time. Progress isn't guaranteed. Without vigilance, each golden age contains the seeds of its own reset. The question isn't if the stars will align again. It's whether we'll heed the patterns written not just in clay, but in the very fabric of history. The suppression of Sumerian knowledge isn't just a fringe conspiracy. It's a documented pattern stretching back over a century, with institutions repeatedly sidelining or sanitizing texts that challenge conventional history. From the moment archaeologists first unearthed cuneiform tablets in the ruins of Nineveh and certain discoveries were met with uneasy silence. Take the case of the Weld Blundell prism, a clay artifact inscribed with the complete Sumerian King List, including its mind-bending antediluvian reign. When it was shipped to Oxford in the early 20th century, scholars initially dismissed its pre-flood chronology as mythical exaggeration, despite its meticulous numerical precision. Why? Because accepting those timelines would have upended biblical chronologies and the Western worldview built upon them. But the censorship didn't stop at academic skepticism. The British Museum's handling of the K8538 tablet, a medical text describing advanced surgeries using life water, is equally telling. Though translated in the 1950s, its contents were relegated to obscure journals, its parallels to modern antiseptics downplayed. Even more blatant was the treatment of the Era Epic, a text detailing celestial bombardments that scorched the land. Early translators like Leonard William King admitted softening its language, fearing its descriptions of fire from heaven sounded too much like nuclear warfare to a post-Hiroshima world. The 20th century saw subtler methods of suppression. When Zachariah Sitchin published his translations of the Lost Book of Enki in the 1970s, mainstream archaeologists didn't just critique his work, they actively marginalized scholars who engaged with it. Prominent Assyriologists like Samuel Noah Kramer, who'd spent decades bringing Sumerian literature to light, suddenly found their funding scrutinized if their research veered into controversial areas. Museum collections became gatekept, with key tablets like the Nippur Lament, which describes Anunnaki, adjusting human lifespans classified as cult objects rather than historical records, limiting access to select researchers. Modern digital age barriers are more sophisticated. Google Arts and Culture's Sumerian tablet archives exclude the most provocative fragments, while AI translation projects prioritize business records over cosmological texts. When the Scoian Collection, one of the world's largest private holdings of cuneiform tablets, attempted to crowdsource translations of the Gersu device, a celestial calculator, academic pressure forced the project to shutter, its data funneled into paywalled journals. The pattern is undeniable. Whenever Sumerian knowledge threatens to rewrite humanity's origins, someone builds a higher wall around it, who benefits from this suppression. Follow the gold. The Sumerians' obsession with gold mining, framed in their texts as a divine mandate, mirrors modern resource extraction empires. Acknowledging that an ancient civilization might have been manipulated to harvest precious metals undermines the narrative of human progress as a voluntary march. Similarly, the Reset Protocol's implications that elites might have known about cyclical collapses for millennia cast colonial conquests and financial systems in a disturbing new light. If catastrophes are predictable, even intentional, then power isn't about leadership. It's about positioning, ensuring you're among the survivors when the wheel turns again. The most damning evidence of suppression isn't in what's hidden, but in what's distorted. Compare standard translations of the Atrahasis epic from the 1960s to those of today. Earlier versions plainly describe the gods testing humanity with engineered plagues. Newer editions soften this to natural disasters. The Enuma Elish's depiction of Marduk rewriting the tablets of fate now often appears as establishing divine order. These aren't academic refinements, they're semantic neuterings stripping the texts of their most provocative edges. Yet the truth persists in fragments, in alternative research, in the stubborn consistency of myths across cultures. The Sumerians warned that knowledge of resets would be obscured, that each cycle would begin with humanity's memory wiped clean. Their greatest fear wasn't destruction. It was amnesia, and as we dig through layers of institutional dust, their message grows louder. The past isn't just prologue, it's a loop waiting to be recognized. The Sumerians weren't alone in their obsession with cyclical destruction. Across oceans and millennia, cultures with no possible contact independently wove eerily similar tales of global resets, floods that purify, fires that cleanse, and gods who grow impatient with their creations. The Hindu Puranas, for example, describe time itself as a wheel of 4 ages or yugas, each descending further into moral decay until the universe requires purification. The current cycle, the Kali Yuga, is said to end in catastrophe, with Kalki, the final avatar of Vishnu, arriving on a white horse to dissolve the corrupted world in flame. But here's the chilling parallel. Like the Sumerian Anunnaki, the Hindu deities don't act out of cruelty. The Matsya Purana explicitly states the flood is a samskara, a ritual purification, meant to restore balance, not just punish. Even the method mirrors Mesopotamia. The god Vishnu warns the righteous King Manu to build an ark preserving seeds and sacred knowledge, a blueprint nearly identical to Ziusadra's survival protocol. Shift to the Maya and the parallels grow even sharper. Their Popol Vuh recounts not 1 but 4 iterations of humanity, each version scrapped by dissatisfied gods. The first humans made from mud were too weak and dissolved. The second, carved from wood, lacked souls and were burned in a fiery rain. The third, fashioned from maize, possessed too much wisdom, threatening the gods' authority, so their vision was clouded. Only the 4th iteration survived, but the text hints this too is temporary. The Maya calendar's infamous end date in 2012 wasn't truly an apocalypse. It marked the close of one Bacton cycle and the start of another, a reset point woven into the fabric of time. Their Dresden Codex even depicts gods wielding water jars to flood the earth, while the Chilam prophesies a future collapse triggered by humanity's arrogance, echoing the Sumerian complaint that the land was too noisy. Egypt's mythology takes a different but equally ominous approach. The Book of the Dead describes periodic unravelings where Maat, the cosmic order, must be restored by force. The god Autumn threatens to dissolve creation back into primordial waters if chaos spreads too far, while the destruction of mankind text recounts Ra sending the lioness goddess Sekhmet to slaughter rebellious humans only to halt the massacre by flooding the land with beer dyed red, a symbolic reset that blends violence with renewal. Most striking is the Edfu building texts, which speak of a former golden age destroyed by a great serpent, after which survivor gods rebuilt civilization piece by piece, implanting knowledge in sacred temples. This isn't just myth, it's a technical manual for post-collapse recovery, mirroring the Sumerian tablets' insistence that resets aren't endings, they're necessary reboots. Even disconnected cultures share uncanny motifs. The Aztecs believed the current, fifth sun, would perish by earthquake. The Hopi prophesied multiple worlds cleansed by fire and ice. And the Norse R-A-G-N-R-O-K Chinese letter as a twilight of gods followed by a verdant rebirth. The consistency isn't in the details, but in the underlying truth these cultures clung to. Civilization is fragile, and survival depends on recognizing the cycle before it completes its turn. The Sumerians may have left the clearest blueprint, but the warning was written across the ancient world in languages of flood and flame. Whether through shared memory or something deeper, a collective intuition about the universe's rhythm, they all agreed on one terrifying premise: history doesn't move forward. It spirals, and we're never as far from the next reset as we'd like to believe. For decades, mainstream science dismissed the idea of catastrophic resets as myth until hard evidence began piling up in the unlikeliest places. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, first proposed in 2007 by a team of geologists and archaeologists, suggests Earth was struck by fragments of a disintegrating comet around 12,800 years ago. The aftermath, a sudden 1,000-year ice age, mass extinctions, and the near collapse of early human civilizations, sound familiar. The Sumerians described almost identical events in their flood epics, right down to the black rain and burning stones from heaven that the era epic claims scorched Mesopotamia. But the parallels go deeper than just a single catastrophe. Core samples from Greenland ice sheets reveal spikes in platinum and nanodiamonds materials associated with cosmic impacts at the exact layer corresponding to the Younger Dryas boundary. Across North America and Europe, a black mat of carbon-rich sediment blankets the archaeological record, marking the abrupt disappearance of megafauna like mammoths and the advanced Clovis culture. The Sumerian lament for describes similar devastation. The storm devastated the city, the people like potsherds lay scattered, even the timeline aligns. The Younger Dryas event occurred roughly 11,600 years before 2000, while Sumerian texts place their great flood around the same epoch, give or take a few centuries of oral history distortion. Mainstream archaeology long resisted these connections, attributing early civilization collapses to climate shifts or warfare. But Graham Hancock's Magicians of the Gods and works by researchers like Randall Carlson have forced a re-evaluation. Advanced LiDAR mapping has uncovered massive, geometrically precise structures like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a site dating back 11,600 years, buried deliberately with thousands of tons of rubble as if preserving knowledge for a future cycle. The Sumerians wrote of the Old Ones before the flood, who built with cyclopean stones and encoded wisdom in underground chambers. Could Göbekli Tepe be one such time capsule? The most compelling overlap lies in the astronomical details. Sumerian astronomer priests tracked a mysterious celestial body they called Nibiru, associating its approach with earthly upheavals. Modern astrophysics has identified traces of a possible Planet 9 perturbing orbits in the Kuiper Belt, a hypothetical world with a highly elliptical trajectory that could theoretically swing into the inner solar system every few millennia. While no direct evidence links it to the Younger Dryas event, the timing is provocative. NASA-owned studies acknowledge periodic asteroid showers from the Taurid meteor stream, a debris trail likely left by the same shattered comet proposed in the impact hypothesis. Critics argue these are coincidences, that ancient people simply mythologized natural disasters, but the precision is hard to ignore. The Sumerians recorded floodwaters rising 15 cubits high in the Gilgamesh epic. Sediment studies show post-Younger Dryas sea levels surging almost exactly that measurement in the Persian Gulf region. Their texts describe the sun standing still in the sky during the catastrophe. Ice core proxies indicate a sudden tilt in Earth's axis around 12,000 years ago. Even the biological reset matches. Sumerian kings' lifespans plummet after the flood, and geneticists have identified a bottleneck in human DNA from the same period, suggesting our ancestors barely survived. Perhaps science and myth aren't opposing forces but different languages describing the same terrifying truth. The Sumerians didn't have spectrometers or ice cores, but they had something equally powerful: generational memory etched in clay. Whether through surviving eyewitness accounts or inherited intuition, they preserved warnings we're only now deciphering with satellites and mass spectrometers. The Younger Dryas hypothesis doesn't prove the Anunnaki were real, but it validates the core Sumerian insight. Civilizations rise and fall not by accident, but in rhythm with forces far beyond our control. And if their calendar of catastrophe holds, the next reset might already be ticking in the stars. The idea that humanity might be caught in a cycle of deliberate resets doesn't just rewrite history, it unravels the very fabric of how we see ourselves. If the Sumerian texts are more than myth, they force us to confront unsettling questions about free will. Are our choices truly ours, or are we navigating paths programmed into us long ago? Modern psychology grapples with similar dilemmas: nature versus nurture, genetic predispositions, societal conditioning, but the reset protocol theory takes it further. It suggests our entire civilization might operate within boundaries set by unseen architects, like actors performing a script we didn't write. The Sumerians believed the Anunnaki implanted forgetfulness after each reset, erasing memories of past cycles. That concept mirrors today's debates about collective amnesia, from suppressed histories to the way trauma reshapes cultural memory across generations. Consider how this plays out in societal structures. Governments and institutions already wield enormous influence over population control, resource distribution, and even lifespan through healthcare and policy. If ancient texts hint that these systems aren't organic developments but echoes of an ancient blueprint, it reframes everything from education to economics. The Sumerian gods enforced strict hierarchies: kings, priests, laborers, a tripartite division that persists in modern class systems. Their floods and plagues weren't random, they were corrections for overpopulation and disobedience. Today, whispers of managed decline or controlled demolition in conspiracy circles take on new weight when viewed through this lens. Even climate change, often framed as a consequence of human negligence, aligns eerily with the Sumerian notion of cyclical environmental purges. Then there's the existential toll. Belief in a reset protocol can breed nihilism. Why strive if civilization is doomed to repeat its collapses? Or paradoxically, radical agency. Some might resign themselves to fate, while others, like the Sumerian hero Gilgamesh, could rebel against their programmed limits. Modern transhumanists already push against biological constraints, seeking to edit genes or merge with AI, echoing Enki's tampering with human DNA. The difference: today's gods aren't deities but tech elites and billionaires, those with the power to shape humanity's next iteration. The irony is palpable. ancient fears of divine manipulation now manifest in surveillance capitalism and algorithmic governance, where data-driven systems curate our realities as surely as any Anunnaki decree. Yet the most profound implication isn't about control, it's about meaning. Religions offer salvation, capitalism sells progress, science promises incremental improvement. But the reset theory strips these narratives bare, suggesting humanity's purpose might be utilitarian, to serve, to adapt, and when necessary, to be recalibrated. The Sumerians coped by recording their warnings in clay, hoping future cycles might break free. Their answer to cosmic dread wasn't submission but vigilance, a refusal to let the next reset catch them unprepared. In an age of climate crises and AI upheaval, their message is clear. Understanding the pattern isn't about despair. It's about the slim, vital chance to rewrite the protocol before it runs again. Among the most persistent modern myths is the idea that Sumerian texts hold a coded countdown, a prophecy of the next great reset. From doomsday forums to blockbuster documentaries, voices claim these ancient tablets predict everything from alien invasions to artificial intelligence takeovers. But how much of this is rooted in actual Sumerian writings, and how much is distorted by fear or wishful thinking? The truth lies somewhere between scholarly caution and conspiratorial frenzy, revealing as much about our modern anxieties as it does about the ancients. Take the infamous Nibiru cataclysm theory, popularized by late-night radio and fringe websites. Proponents argue that Sumerian astronomy foretold a rogue planet's return, bringing earthquakes and pole shifts. They point to vague phrases like "great star with wings" and "destroyer from the heavens" as proof. Yet original tablets describe Nibiru as a celestial marker, not an apocalyptic bullet. The misreading stems from a fundamental flaw projecting 21st century fears onto 4,000-year-old metaphors. When the Anunnaki spoke of cyclical destruction, they framed it as a natural rhythm, not a Hollywood-style spectacle. The real conspiracy isn't in the stars, it's in our refusal to see ancient texts as anything but mirrors for our own existential dread. Then there's the alien savior narrative, where figures like Enki are recast as benevolent extraterrestrials preparing to rescue humanity. New Age channels brim with claims that Sumerian gods encoded messages in DNA or left hidden technologies beneath pyramids. Some even cite the Lost Book of Enki despite its dubious origins as a galactic instruction manual. But the authentic tablets paint a murkier picture. Enki wasn't a hero, he was a complex figure who defied his peers not out of love for humans but because we were useful. The Anunnaki's interventions were pragmatic, not paternalistic. This revisionism says more about modern longing for cosmic caretakers than Sumerian reality. Perhaps the most dangerous twist is weaponizing these texts to justify extremist ideologies. White supremacist groups falsely claim Sumerians described a pure race created by gods, twisting genetic narratives to fit racist frameworks. Conspiracy influencers cherry-pick lines about mixing clay and blood to spin tales of forbidden hybrids and shadowy elites. These distortions ignore the Sumerians' own multicultural reality, their trade networks stretching from Egypt to India, their pantheon infused with borrowed deities. The tablets warn against hubris, not some imagined racial purity. Yet buried beneath the noise, a legitimate question remains. Why do these ancient stories resonate so powerfully today? Maybe it's because they articulate a truth we sense but can't prove. That civilization is fragile, that progress isn't guaranteed. The Sumerians didn't need conspiracy theories. They lived the cycles firsthand, watching their ziggurats crumble and their language fade. Their warnings weren't about asteroids or aliens, but about humanity's endless capacity to forget. In an age of climate crises and AI unknowns, their real prophecy might be this: the next reset won't come from the stars. It's already in our hands. The choice isn't between saviors and destroyers, it's between remembering and repeating. Beneath the windswept plains of southeastern Turkey, an ancient mystery lurks, one that could rewrite our understanding of civilization's origins. Göbekli Tepe, a sprawling complex of carved stone pillars arranged in concentric circles, predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years and the Great Pyramids by 7,000. But what makes this site so explosive isn't just its age, it's the way it was buried. Around 8000 BCE, someone deliberately entombed the entire complex under thousands of tons of earth, preserving it like a time capsule. The Sumerians wrote of old ones who hid knowledge before the flood, and Göbekli Tepe's careful interment mirrors their descriptions eerily. Even more provocative are the carvings: serpents, scorpions, and vultures encircling humanoid figures, symbols the Sumerians later associated with Anunnaki punishments and celestial resets. Across the globe, underwater ruins whisper of similar cataclysms. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument step terraces and right-angled walls lie 60 feet below sea level, submerged when Ice Age glaciers melted, a timeline matching Sumerian flood accounts. In India's Gulf of Cambay, sonar has revealed a grid of streets and buildings under 100 feet of water, with pottery shards dating back 9,500 years. These aren't lone anomalies. From Cuba's submerged megaliths to Indonesia's Gunung Padang, a pyramid-like structure with layers dating back 20,000 years, the planet is littered with advanced ruins that defy conventional timelines. The smoking gun may lie in geology. The Younger Dryas boundary layer, a thin band of sediment found worldwide, contains nanodiamonds, melted glass, and platinum spikes, telltale signs of a cosmic impact 12,800 years ago. This same stratum coincides with the sudden extinction of mammoths, the disappearance of the Clovis people, and critically, the approximate date Sumerian texts assign to their great flood. Even more telling are the black mats of carbon-rich soil found atop this layer, evidence of continent-wide wildfires. The era epic's description of fire from heaven that turned the soil to ash suddenly feels less like poetry and more like reportage. But perhaps the most haunting evidence comes from Antarctica. Recent ice-penetrating radar has revealed 3 pyramid-like structures under 2 miles of ice, with geometric precision suggesting artificial origin. If verified, they'd have to predate Antarctica's glaciation, at least 34 million years ago by mainstream science. Yet Sumerian tablets speak of a first civilization, established by the Anunnaki in a land of ice, later destroyed when the great waters rose. Coincidence or fragments of a forgotten epoch when humanity, or something before us, built on a now frozen continent? These discoveries force a painful question. If advanced societies rose and fell long before recorded history, why don't we find more evidence? The answer may lie in the very nature of resets. Cataclysms don't just destroy, they recycle. Tsunamis pulverize cities into sand, glaciers grind monuments to dust, and rising seas swallow entire continents. The Sumerians understood this, writing that each reset scoured the land clean, so that no trace remained. Göbekli Tepe survived because someone buried it intentionally, a message in stone for future cycles. Now, as satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar reveal more hidden ruins every year, a pattern emerges. From the Sahara's buried rivers to the Amazon's lost cities, the Earth is coughing up secrets it held for millennia. The Sumerians warned that resets recur when the wheel turns full circle. With climate upheaval and cosmic near misses like the Chelyabinsk meteor, one wonders, are we digging up the past or previewing the future? The stones are speaking. The question is whether we're listening. If the Sumerian texts are taken at face value, that humanity was genetically engineered by advanced beings, then we're forced to confront ethical questions that ripple far beyond ancient mythology. Imagine a scenario where our very DNA isn't the product of natural evolution, but the deliberate tinkering of extraterrestrial scientists. This isn't just science fiction. It's a moral quagmire that challenges foundational ideas about autonomy, consent, and the sanctity of life. The Atrahasis epic describes the Anunnaki mixing divine blood with clay to create humans as laborers, a process that mirrors modern gene splicing techniques. But where do we draw the line between creation and coercion? If humanity was designed to serve, does that invalidate our sense of free will, or merely contextualize it within a broader cosmic hierarchy? One of the most unsettling implications is the concept of ownership. The Sumerians portrayed humans as assets, tools to mine gold, build cities, and bear the burdens the gods wished to avoid. Texts like the Enuma Elish frame humanity's existence as transactional, a means to an end. This raises disturbing parallels to modern debates about bioethics. If a superior intelligence crafted us for a purpose, do we owe them allegiance, or do we have the right to rebel, as the Epic of Gilgamesh suggests when its hero defies the gods to seek immortality? The tension here mirrors contemporary struggles over genetic patents, where corporations claim ownership over engineered life forms. Are we repeating the Anunnaki's playbook by commodifying biology? Then there's the issue of ongoing manipulation. Sumerian tablets describe post-flood adjustments, lifespans shortened, fertility reduced, as if humanity were a software update with bugs to fix. If true, this paints a picture of beings who didn't just create us, but continually tweaked our design without consent. Modern genetics is edging toward similar capabilities, with CRISPR allowing scientists to edit embryos and mRNA vaccines reprogramming cellular behavior. The ethical dilemma is identical. Who gets to decide what's improvement versus interference? The Anunnaki, like today's biotech pioneers, may have acted with the arrogance of creators who believe they know best, oblivious to the moral weight of altering a species' trajectory. But the most profound question isn't about the past, it's about the future. If humanity is the product of genetic tampering, does that mean we're destined to become the tamperers? The Sumerians warned that knowledge of the reset protocol was cyclical, that each iteration of civilization would rediscover and potentially misuse it. Today, as we stand on the brink of editing our own genome and designing AI to outthink us, we're echoing the very actions we ascribe to the Anunnaki. The irony is palpable. In seeking to uncover whether we were engineered, we may be completing the cycle by engineering our successors. Perhaps the ultimate ethical test isn't deciphering the Sumerian texts, it's ensuring we don't repeat their gods' mistakes. The temperature spikes, the wildfires, the rising tides, they all feel like echoes from an ancient script, don't they? The Sumerians didn't just predict resets, they described their triggers with uncanny precision: ecological imbalance, societal decay, and celestial interference. Now, as our planet grapples with climate upheaval, bioengineered pandemics, and artificial intelligence that outpaces human control, it's impossible not to wonder, are these the harbingers of another reset, or just the chaotic drumbeat of progress? Take climate change. The Era epic recounts how the gods unleashed 7 evil winds to scorch the land when humanity overstepped its bounds. Today, satellite data shows Arctic permafrost thawing at rates that alarm even the most conservative scientists, while CO2 levels mirror those of the Pliocene epoch when sea levels were 80 feet higher. The Sumerians warned of the Great Star, whose approach would melt the mountains, a description that mirrors modern fears of solar flares or asteroid-induced climate shifts. Even their fixation on gold, a metal we now know can reflect solar radiation, hints at an ancient understanding of atmospheric manipulation. Coincidence? Or coded wisdom about planetary systems reaching breaking points? Then there's the specter of engineered plagues. The Atrahasis epic details 3 divine attempts to cull humanity. First with pestilence, then famine, finally the flood, each time because we multiplied beyond measure. In 2020, as labs worldwide tinkered with gain-of-function research and synthetic biology, a virus emerged that shut down civilizations. the Sumerians wouldn't have called it COVID-19. They might have termed it the breath of Nergal, the plague god testing humanity's resilience yet again. And just as their texts described survivors carrying fragments of knowledge forward, our era saw mRNA vaccines developed in days, a flicker of the Anunnaki's life water, or merely human ingenuity repeating an age-old dance with disaster. But the most unnerving parallel is AI. The Sumerians spoke of the tablets of destiny, objects that could rewrite reality itself. Today, neural networks like GPT-4 or quantum computers operate as black boxes even to their creators, algorithms churning out decisions that reshape economies and politics. Ancient texts describe the Anunnaki debating whether humans had grown too loud, too disruptive. Now, Silicon Valley whispers about the alignment problem, how to ensure superintelligent machines don't deem us the noise needing elimination. The Lost Book of Enki even prophesied a final reset by fire and stones from heaven, a phrase that takes on grim new meaning when you consider autonomous drones or orbital kinetic weapons. Yet the most compelling evidence isn't in the crises themselves, but in our reaction to them. The Sumerians documented how each reset was preceded by societal division, elites hoarding resources, populations fracturing into warring factions. Sound familiar? Modern inequality gaps now rival those of pre-revolutionary France, while algorithmic echo chambers fuel ideological trenches deeper than any in history. The Lament for describes citizens tearing at one another like starving dogs before the gods intervened. Our digital age hasn't just connected us, it's amplified our capacity for self-destruction, ticking every box the ancients outlined as pre-reset behavior. So are we doomed to repeat the cycle? Not necessarily. The Sumerians left clues for breaking it, buried in their obsession with astronomy and sacred geometry. Their ziggurats weren't just temples, they were observatories, aligned to celestial events that could forewarn of calamity. Today, projects like the Sentinel Asteroid Early Warning System or CRISPR-based gene drives suggest we're building our own tablets of destiny, tools to hack the reset protocol before it executes. The difference this time, unlike the Sumerians, we may have the science to spot the wheel turning and the will to jump off before it crushes us again. The real question isn't whether the signs match, it's whether we'll heed them as myth or manual. The Anunnaki's greatest mistake might have been assuming humanity would never decipher their designs. Now, as we mine their clay tablets with quantum computers and stitch synthetic genes into living cells, we're no longer just subjects of the experiment. We're the ones holding the clipboard, and the choice between reset and evolution has never been more ours to make. Mainstream scholars have long pushed back against the idea of Sumerian reset theories, dismissing them as modern projections onto ancient texts. Assyriologists like Irving Finkel of the British Museum argue that flood myths served as moral allegories, not historical records comparable to how Aesop's fables taught lessons rather than documenting real events. He points to linguistic nuances like the word abubu in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which translates broadly as chaotic deluge rather than a specific engineered catastrophe. These stories, Finkel insists, were tools for social cohesion, not warnings of cyclical apocalypses. Archaeologist Eric Klein takes the critique further, highlighting the selective reading of evidence. Sites like Göbekli Tepe, often cited as proof of pre-flood advanced civilizations, show no signs of sudden destruction. Instead, they were carefully backfilled over centuries, likely as part of ritual closures. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, while compelling, remains hotly debated, with critics noting gaps in the geological record. Cherry-picking data to fit a narrative, Klein warns, is how pseudo-archaeology thrives. He compares reset theorists to 19th-century scholars who mistook Mesopotamian ziggurats for the Tower of Babel, conflating myth with literal history. Even the Anunnaki's portrayal faces scrutiny. Professor Megan Lewis, a specialist in Near Eastern religions, emphasizes that Sumerian gods were metaphors for natural forces. Enlil, often cast as a ruthless overseer in reset theories, was primarily a storm deity, his destructive decrees reflecting seasonal floods essential for agriculture. The famed Tablets of Destiny, likely ritual objects symbolizing royal authority, not cosmic control panels. Lewis notes how later Babylonian texts softened Sumerian narratives, turning complex deities into tidy moral archetypes. This evolution, she argues, proves these stories were fluid, not frozen records of extraterrestrial intervention. The genetic engineering angle unravels under scientific scrutiny. Geneticist Adam Rutherford points out that Homo sapiens' DNA shows no traces of sudden, artificial manipulation 12,000 years ago, only the slow grind of natural selection. The spliced genes theory relies on misconstrued phrases like divine blood, which Sumerians used poetically, not biologically. Even the Anunnaki's alleged gold mining collapses under analysis. Mesopotamia's gold artifacts postdate Egyptian ones, undermining claims of advanced Sumerian metallurgy. Yet the debate persists because archaeology itself is fragmentary. Over 90% of cuneiform tablets remain untranslated, and key sites like Eridu, the Sumerians' first city, lie under politically unstable regions. Critics concede that mainstream science hasn't fully explained anomalies like the precision of Sumerian star charts or the global consistency of flood myths. But as historian Harriet Crawford cautions, mysteries aren't proof of aliens, they're invitations to dig deeper. The real reset, she suggests, is in our approach, swapping sensationalism for rigorous curiosity, one shovel of dirt at a time. After centuries buried in dust, the forbidden Sumerian texts still refuse to be silenced. Their warnings about engineered humans, celestial resets, and lost cycles of civilization aren't just relics of ancient imagination. They're mirrors held up to our deepest existential questions. Whether you view these clay tablets as myth, misunderstood history, or something far more unsettling, their patterns are impossible to ignore. The flood stories aligning with geological catastrophes, the Anunnaki's genetic tampering echoing modern bioengineering, the obsessive tracking of cosmic cycles that science is only now verifying. What makes these accounts so compelling isn't just their age, it's their uncomfortable relevance. In an era of climate upheaval, AI breakthroughs, and genetic editing, we're living through what the Sumerians might have called another crossing point, another turn of the wheel. But here's the crucial takeaway. The real power of these texts lies not in blind belief, but in the questions they force us to ask. How much of human history has been lost to time's erosion, or something more deliberate? Why do cultures worldwide share nearly identical stories of destruction and rebirth? And if civilizations truly rise and fall in cycles, what does that mean for our moment in the spiral? You don't have to accept ancient astronaut theories or doomsday prophecies to recognize that humanity's origins are far stranger than standard textbooks suggest. The Sumerians didn't just record events, they encoded warnings, leaving breadcrumbs for future generations to piece together. So where does that leave us? Not in helpless anticipation of some predestined collapse, but armed with curiosity. Archaeology uncovers new clues yearly, from underwater megaliths to AI-assisted translations of cuneiform, each finding chipping away at the walls between myth and history. Perhaps the ultimate lesson of the Reset Protocol isn't about fate but agency. The Anunnaki, whether literal or symbolic, represent a force that reshapes life without consent. Our challenge and our opportunity is to rewrite that narrative. By questioning, researching, and connecting dots across disciplines, we become more than passive subjects of history. We become its investigators and possibly its next authors. If these mysteries resonate with you, you're not alone. Thousands of researchers, from maverick linguists to NASA astrophysicists, are piecing together this puzzle one fragment at a time. Want to dive deeper? Hit subscribe and join us as we explore more enigmas, from the submerged ruins of lost continents to the secret codes hidden in sacred texts. The past isn't finished speaking, and the next revelation might be the one that changes